I want to tell you something I have never said out loud before. I cut off my parents on Christmas Day. Not after a big fight, not after screaming or throwing things. I cut them off quietly, calmly, with a cup of tea in my hand and my heart completely made up. My name is Sarah. I am 31 years old. I live alone in a small apartment in Denver, Colorado. I have a steady job, a good therapist, and a life I built entirely by myself. And for 6 months after that Christmas, I heard nothing from my parents. No calls, no messages, no cards. Nothing. I slept better than I had in years. Then, one Saturday morning in June, I heard a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. My mother, my father, and between them, a uniformed police officer. I stood in my hallway for a long moment. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. I had prepared for something like this. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew them. I opened the door. The officer looked at me carefully. "Ma'am, we received a welfare check request. Your parents say they haven't been able to reach you in several months and are concerned for your safety." I looked past him at my parents. My mother was crying. My father had his arms crossed. And I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I had known this moment would come. And I was ready. What my childhood was really like, to understand why I cut them off, you need to understand what growing up in that house was actually like. My parents were not violent. They never hit me. They never went without food or clothing or shelter. From the outside, we looked like a perfectly normal family. But inside that house, there was a different kind of damage. I was the oldest of 3 children, and from the time I was about 9 years old, I became the emotional support system for the entire family. My mother would come to me crying about my father. My father would come to me angry about my mother. I sat between them like a wall they both leaned on, and slowly, I was crushed under the weight of it. When I was 16, I was cooking full family dinners, managing household bills, and helping my younger siblings with their homework while my parents argued in the next room. When I got into university at 18, my mother cried for 3 days. Not because she was proud, because who would manage the house? I went anyway. I worked 2 jobs throughout my degree. I sent money home every month. When I graduated, my parents did not come to the ceremony. My father said it was too far to travel. It was a 2-hour drive. I told myself it was okay. I told myself they were doing their best. For 11 more years, I kept telling myself that. But there is a limit. There is always a limit. And Christmas Day was mine. Christmas that year started the same way it always did. I drove 2 hours to my parents' house. I brought food I had cooked myself. I brought gifts I had bought with my own money. I arrived with a smile that took real effort to hold. Within 20 minutes of walking through the door, my mother pulled me into the kitchen. She told me she needed money. $3,000 for a credit card bill she had hidden from my father. She said if he found out, there would be a serious problem. She said I was the only one who could fix it. I asked her how long this had been going on. She told me 2 years. I asked her how much total she owed. She looked away. $14,000. I had already paid off a similar amount for them 3 years earlier. An emergency that had also somehow only I could fix. set down the dish I was holding. Very carefully, very quietly. And I said, "Mom, I am not going to pay this." She stared at me. "I love you," I said. "But I am not a bank. I am not a therapist. I am not a housekeeper. I am your daughter. And I have been treated as everything except that for my entire life." She started crying immediately. My father appeared in the doorway. I picked up my coat. I picked up my bag. I said, "Merry Christmas." And I walked out. I drove 2 hours home. I did not cry until I was inside with the door locked. And then I cried for about an hour. After that, I felt something I had not felt in 30 years. Relief. So there I was, 6 months later, standing at my open front door. Police officer on my step, parents behind him. The officer spoke first. Professional, respectful, doing his job. "Ma'am, I just need to confirm you're okay. Are you all right?" "I'm completely fine," I said. "Thank you for checking." He glanced at a small notepad. "Your parents reported that you've been unreachable for 6 months, and that you were in a distressed state the last time they saw you." I nodded slowly. "I made a choice to end contact with my parents in December. That is a personal decision I made as a 31-year-old adult. I am not in distress. I am not missing. I am not being held or controlled by anyone." The officer nodded. He had clearly done this before. He looked back at my parents. My mother stepped forward. "Sarah, please. We are just worried. We are your parents. We have a right to know you are safe." I looked at her. "You now know I am safe," I said. The officer confirmed it. "I hope that gives you peace." "You're being cruel," she said. "Officer," I said, turning back to him, "am I legally required to have contact with my parents?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am. You are an adult. You have every right to choose who you communicate with." "Thank you," I said. I looked at my parents one final time. "Please do not come here again," I said, "and please do not send anyone else." I closed the door. I stood with my back against it for a moment. Then I went back to the book I had been reading. That was 14 months ago. Let me tell you what has happened since. My parents tried 2 more wellness checks over the following 3 months. Each time, the responding officers confirmed I was fine and informed my parents that repeated non-emergency wellness checks on a healthy, aware adult could be considered harassment. After that, the visit stopped. I received a letter from my mother 6 months later. 8 pages. Handwritten. It said I was selfish. It said I had broken the family. It said everything that had gone wrong in her life was because I had abandoned her. I read every word. I did not respond. I filed it in a folder I keep for documentation purposes. And I moved on. My therapist told me something I have thought about almost every day since. She said, "The fact that cutting off your parents felt like a loss tells you how deeply you loved them. The fact that you felt relief afterward tells you how long you had been suffering." Both of those things were true at the same time. I still have days where I miss the parents I wished I had. Not the ones I grew up with. The imagined version. The ones who would have come to my graduation. The ones who would have asked about my life without needing something. But I also have something now that I never had growing up. Quiet. Peace. A home that feels like mine. I am not asking anyone to make the same choice I made. Cutting off family is not for everyone. But if you are exhausted, if you have given everything and received nothing, If you have confused obligation with love for so long you no longer know the difference, then maybe this story was for you. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to close the door. Some people will say I was wrong. Some already have. But I have slept peacefully every night for 14 months. And that is an answer I trust more than anyone's opinion. If this story reached you today, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means more than you know.